This view of the India Gate captures the stifling reality of a Delhi winter. The air is a heavy, gray, toxic blanket that drops visibility to zero and makes every breath a struggle. It is an environment the characters were desperate to leave behind. That was the goal for Yavin, Riya, and Ravi. They planned to trade this hazardous haze for a weekend in the pristine, snow-covered mountains of Himachal. They departed in a hired cab at 4 a.m. Despite the hour, the group was energetic, quickly forming a rapport with their cheerful, talkative driver. Yavin and his friends were accustomed to checking the AQI on their phones and wearing masks for their health. To them, the fog was a collection of particulates and poor visibility, a physical nuisance they assumed they understood and could manage. 4 hours into the drive, the atmosphere shifted. Despite it being 8 a.m., the sky above the highway remained unnaturally, oppressively black. Then they hit a wall. This image shows the opaque, heavy texture of the fog that swallowed the highway, turning the world into a series of ghostly, indistinguishable silhouettes. The driver's cheerful mood vanished instantly. His face went pale as he gripped the wheel, giving the group a single, non-negotiable rule. No matter what happens, do not roll down the windows while they are inside this mist. The driver recognized the conditions for a chalawa, a supernatural presence that uses extreme fog as camouflage. This entity hides within the shifting movement of the mist, waiting for a point of entry. The passengers laughed. They viewed the driver's warning as a localized superstition, a story meant to explain away a patch of bad weather. By leaning on their modern skepticism, they unknowingly ignored the only defense they had. As they moved deeper into the whiteout, Riya was suddenly hit by an inexplicable panic. She began to gasp for air, her chest tightening as if the oxygen inside the locked car had simply vanished. Unable to breathe, Riya ignored the driver's warning and pushed the window down just an inch. A thick, physical tendril of white mist instantly slithered through the gap and filled the dark cabin. Riya finally caught her breath, but as she looked around, the interior had changed. Ravi, Yavin, and the driver were gone. The car was moving forward, but the driver's seat was empty. She threw the door open and stumbled out, but the car instantly vanished. She was standing alone on the asphalt, surrounded by a featureless white void with no landmarks, no traffic, and no sound. Out of the mist, the chalawa materialized, a 12-foot-tall dark shadow. Before Riya could even scream, she was shoved violently to the ground by an invisible force. The chalawa operates by severing its victims from the group. Riya's mind had been pulled into a space where her friends and the car simply ceased to exist, leaving her defenseless before the shadow struck. Back in the physical reality of the car, Riya hadn't moved. The second she opened that window, she had collapsed against the door, completely unconscious. The driver began to scream. He was in total hysterics, shouting that the breach had let the illusion inside and that they were all lost. Yavin stayed focused on what he could see. He interpreted Riya's collapse as a medical emergency and the driver's reaction as a mental breakdown. He forced the driver to accelerate, desperate to reach a hospital. The car tore through the mist at high speed until a young woman appeared in the headlights. There was a sickening thud as the bumper struck her, and the car skidded to a stop. Yavin sprinted to the front of the car and found a girl lying in the road. When he turned her over, he found himself looking at Riya's face. Yavin looks back at the car to check the Riya he had just seen in the back seat. The doors were open, and the interior was silent. Every one of the seats was empty. The events on the road show a total breakdown of shared reality. Logic had failed. Yavin was now caught in a loop where he was simultaneously trying to save an unconscious friend and mourning her body on the pavement. Yavin's rational mind broke. He loaded the bleeding body from the road into the empty car and took the wheel himself, determined to drive out of the fog. As he sped forward, the chalawa shifted its focus entirely onto him. The infection that began with Riya had now fully claimed Yavin's perception. The mist parted one last time. Standing directly in the path of the speeding car was that same massive shadow. Yavin jerked the steering wheel in a reflex of pure terror. The car left the road, careening through the brush, before slamming head-on into a tree. The chalawa doesn't need to strike its victims physically. It creates a reality so terrifying that the victims eventually use their own survival instincts to destroy themselves. This image of a clear morning over the highway shows the world after the fog lifted. Locals found the wrecked car resting in the grass, just off the shoulder of a perfectly clear road. All 4 passengers were found inside the wreck. Everyone was alive. There was no girl in the road, and no one had ever actually left the vehicle. While their bodies survived, the psychological damage was permanent. Yavin's sanity remains fractured, and Ria is haunted by the shadow, seeing it looming in the corners of her vision every day. The Chalawa leaves the body behind, taking the mind as its trophy. The next time you find yourself driving through a dense, unnatural fog, remember what happened to Yavin, and keep your windows rolled up.